September 1914. Paris is safe, but Europe is not. The thunder of the Marne has faded, yet on the northern plains of France, a new storm is gathering. Two armies, each believing victory is one maneuver away, begin a strange and desperate dance, sliding north, step by step, village by village, not toward triumph, but toward a line that will never move again. When the Battle of the Marne ended, the world thought the war had been saved from disaster. But what no one realized was that the true disaster was only beginning. The Germans had failed to take Paris, yet they had not been defeated. Their armies still stood strong, their lines still unbroken. The French and British believed one more push could finish them. The Germans believed one more maneuver could turn the tide. And so began a new phase of the Great War, a race not of speed, but of exhaustion. A race across northern France and Belgium, fought not for cities or glory, but for position. It would stretch from the river Aisne to the cold, flooded fields of Flanders. It would decide how the next 4 years of war would be fought. And it would end, not with a victory, but with a wall of trenches from the Alps to the sea. This is the story of the race to the sea, 1914. How two modern armies, in trying to outflank each other, built the deadliest stalemate in human history. After the Battle of the Marne in September 1914, the thunder of German guns around Paris faded. The Allies had stopped the Schlieffen Plan, and France was safe. For now. But the victory at the Marne was deceptive. It marked not the end of the war of movement, but its transformation into something far more static, far more brutal. The German armies of von Kluck and von Bülow, though forced to retreat northward, had not been destroyed. Their withdrawal to the river Aisne was deliberate and disciplined. Behind them, General Erich von Falkenhayn, newly appointed as chief of the General Staff after Moltke's collapse, made a quick assessment. Germany's dream of a swift knockout blow had failed. But its armies were still intact, its rail network still powerful, and its defensive lines could still hold. When the French and British pursued the Germans to the Aisne in mid-September, they expected to finish what the Marne had started. Instead, they encountered something new. The German forces had entrenched themselves along the high ridges of the Chemin des Dames. Machine guns were emplaced at commanding points, artillery registered every slope, and each assault by the Allies was shredded before it could even cross open ground. The British Expeditionary Force, under Field Marshal Sir John French, found that the old habits of warfare, the ordered advance, the gallant charge, were now suicide. The battlefield had become dominated by firepower, not maneuver. Both sides, recognizing this grim truth, began digging in. At first, these were shallow trenches, hastily scooped out by riflemen for cover. But soon they grew deeper, longer, and more permanent. What began as improvisation became system. The Aisne thus marked the birth of positional warfare. The Germans had chosen the line deliberately, a temporary defensive anchor while they regrouped. The French, by contrast, had been forced to halt through failure. Yet both now shared the same fate. The war of mobility that had defined August 1914 was over. When the front froze on the Aisne, neither side was willing to accept stalemate. The generals, trained in the doctrines of the 19th century, still believed that victory depended on turning the enemy's flank. Joffre, believing the Germans overstretched, ordered his armies to swing northward to outflank and crush the enemy's exposed right. Falkenhayn, on the other side, drew the same conclusion. If the front could not be broken, it could still be turned. Both commands, therefore, began to move laterally, northward, in search of open ground. What followed was not a literal race, but a continuous sideways march of entire armies. Whenever one side extended its line north, the other mirrored the movement to block it. It was a deadly chess game played across the farmlands of northern France. A move, a counter-move, and then the digging of new trenches. By late September, Joffre's left wing under General de Castelnau advanced toward Picardy, attempting to envelop the German flank near Péronne and Bapaume. Facing him, Crown Prince Ruprecht of Bavaria commanded the German Sixth Army, equally determined to turn the French. Both forces clashed repeatedly, at Albert, at Bapaume, at small villages whose names would soon become meaningless, except as markers of attrition. Each battle followed the same rhythm. An advance began, often supported by cavalry screens and light artillery. The opposing side detected it, shifted reserves by rail, met it head-on, and halted it with concentrated fire. Within days, both sides were again entrenched, facing each other across newly churned earth. By early October, Castelnau's reports to Joffre were resigned. Every flank he tried to turn was already defended. The Germans, moving faster by rail, always reached the threatened sector first. Germany's interior rail system, denser, better coordinated, and centrally managed by the General Staff, gave them the ability to redeploy entire corps laterally within 48 hours. By contrast, the French relied heavily on road marches and incomplete rail coordination, hampered by local friction. Every time Joffre extended his line, Falkenhayn met him with new troops. By early October, Joffre ordered the BEF to withdraw from the Aisne and redeploy north to Flanders. It was a massive logistical challenge. Tens of thousands of men, horses, guns, and wagons moved hundreds of kilometers. The operation took nearly 2 weeks, during which the Germans continued their own northern advance. By the time the BEF arrived near La Bassée and Armentières, they found fresh German units already waiting. Between mid-September and mid-October, a strange repetition unfolded. Battles erupted in sequence: the Aisne, Albert, Arras, La Bassée, Armentières, each one an echo of the last. Armies advanced, collided, entrenched, and stopped. The lateral front lengthened until it stretched over 300 kilometers. Machine guns and rapid-fire artillery favored defense to such an extent that even the smallest trench could stop an entire battalion. Cavalry had become obsolete. Every attempt to regain mobility created more immobility. By the end of October, the front ran unbroken from the Swiss border to the Belgian coast. The Western Front was born. By early October 1914, the armies of Europe were locked in a vast lateral struggle. The French extended their left wing through Artois toward Flanders, while the Germans pivoted their right wing northward to envelop the Allies and reach the Channel ports. The coastline represented strategic access to Britain. Whoever reached it first could change the course of the war. The first major clash of this northern phase came at Arras in early October. General Foch's French 10th Army tried to press northward, while Crown Prince Ruprecht's 6th Army countered. Both sides attempted to outflank each other simultaneously, but each found the other entrenched. Artillery duels, aerial reconnaissance, and the first attempts at rolling barrages all failed to break the deadlock. Arras demonstrated that both armies had reached tactical parity. Their doctrines differed, but their outcomes were identical. Blood for mud. Behind the front, rail mobility decided everything. Germany's interior lines allowed Falkenhayn to shuttle entire corps laterally along the front, faster than the Allies could march. Every French attempt to turn the German flank found new divisions waiting. The race thus became self-defeating. Each move to extend the line simply invited the enemy to mirror it, until the front stretched to the limits of geography. In mid-October, the BEF entered the Battle of La Bassée. The terrain, flat, industrial, and soaked, nullified maneuver. Infantry advancing in open order were scythed down by machine gun fire. Attempts to flank strong points failed as fields of fire overlapped. After days of battle, both sides entrenched. The British held shallow ridges, the Germans fortified the opposite slopes. This was the first mature trench system of the northern sector. As the line reached Belgium, the terrain changed again. Flanders, with its canals and low ground, was even less suited for movement. The Germans sought to capture Calais and Dunkirk, while the Allies defended desperately. The Belgians, retreating from Antwerp, flooded the Yser plain to halt the German advance, creating a natural barrier. By November, the front had reached the sea near Nieuwpoort. The war of maneuver was over. Strategically, both commands faced the same dilemma. Neither could achieve decisive results through movement, yet both refused to accept stalemate. Falkenhayn accepted attrition as the new logic of war, to exhaust rather than outflank. Joffre persisted in frontal assaults, convinced that persistence would bring victory. The race to the sea had proven that industrial firepower had destroyed the very concept of maneuver. By November 1914, the last gaps between armies had closed. The Western Front stretched from Switzerland to the sea, a single defensive organism. No one had planned such a war. The doctrines of 1914, built on speed and decisive battle, were now useless. The race to the sea ended not in victory, but in paralysis. Trenches, once temporary, became permanent. Soldiers deepened them, added firing steps, dugouts, and barbed wire. By late 1914, each side had multiple lines forming a defense in depth. Between them lay a wasteland, no man's land, ruled by artillery. This transformation was not ordered. It evolved from necessity. Units fortified to survive, and their work solidified into the architecture of modern war. Firepower dictated everything. Machine guns, quick-firing artillery, and high explosives rendered open movement suicidal. Command structures collapsed under the strain. Generals could no longer see the battle. Orders moved slowly through runners and unreliable telephones. Initiative vanished. War became mechanical, planned centrally, executed blindly. For the soldiers, the psychological shift was profound. The heroic illusions of August were gone. Life in the trenches was monotonous, filthy, and terrifying. Death was impersonal, arriving from shells or snipers. The war ceased to feel like a struggle of nations and became instead a test of endurance. Strategically, the race to the sea locked both sides into equilibrium. Germany held industrial regions. The Allies held the ports. Neither could destroy the other. Falkenhayn concluded that victory must come through attrition, to bleed France white. Joffre insisted on counterattacks, clinging to the offensive ideal. Both were trapped by the same truth. Industrial war could no longer be won by maneuver. By the close of 1914, Europe had crossed a threshold. The old doctrines of decisive battle were gone. In their place stood new methods, creeping barrages, infiltration, and the first concepts of combined arms. The race to the sea had destroyed one era and created another. It left behind not glory, but the mud and wire of a war that would last 4 more years. The generals had raced to the sea, but what they reached was not victory. It was the end of movement. The Western Front was complete, and with it, the age of industrial stalemate had begun. The race to the sea was not a campaign in the traditional sense. It was the death of one kind of war and the birth of another. What began as a series of flanking maneuvers ended as the blueprint for 4 years of attrition. The generals had sought mobility and found entrapment. The soldiers had marched for victory and found endurance. The guns of August had opened the war of movement. The race to the sea had closed it. And from its trenches, a new kind of world was born. One shaped by industry, fire, and the long, slow grind of total war.